Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all the panelists for their testimony today. And, I was in small business for 22 years in the radio business. We dealt with software upgrades and changes and systems and all that. And I'm feeling a lot of those emotions come because when we'd put a new system in, there'd be multiple vendors, and every one of them's system operated perfectly except when it all came together. And then they all pointed fingers at somebody else. And I'm feeling a lot of that today. Only as a person who represents 750,000 people and $500 million on the line, it's why we're here, is to figure out what went wrong. And I'd just like to know on this whole end-to-end thing, because it sounds like each of you has said that you designed your system and tested it to the specifications you were given by CMS. Is that accurate, yes or no? Ms. Campbell?
That is correct.
Mr. Slavitt?
Yes.
Elsie?
Yes.
Our systems are not integrated.
All right. So you get to sit there and not quite get as much opportunity here today. But I want to go then to the first two. If you designed it to CMS's specifications and you tested it and felt it was all good to go, where did this break down? Was it, in most systems you operate in, do you do end-to-end tests prior to the rollout? And if so, when would you have preferred that end-to-end testing have been done by CMS? Ms. Campbell?
Let's see if I can get all of those questions in.
I'll make it simple. When should the end-to-end test been started?
There's never enough testing, for sure.
When did it occur?
But it occurred the last 2 weeks in September.
So do you think that's an adequate time frame for a system this mammoth with 1/6 of the nation's economy and millions of people coming into it? Did that give your company adequate time to make sure everything was integrated and going to work?
It would have been better to have more time.
And how much more time would you have preferred to have?
I don't have an exact date.
Did you make any recommendations to CMS about the need for end-to-end testing to occur sooner than the last 2 weeks before this whole thing went live?
I did not, but I could check.
Did anyone in your company make a recommendation?
I'd have to go back and
I'd like to know that. Mr. Slavitt?
Yes, ideally, integrated testing would have occurred well before that did.
How far in advance of a major website coming online?
Sure. Well, with enough time to correct flaws before they begin. I couldn't give you an exact date.
Do you do any work for anybody else outside of CMS where end-to-end testing is required?
Yes.
And in those situations, are those commercial situations or government?
Both.
And in those situations, what's the standard protocol? What's the recommended industry standard for end-to-end tests before rolling up a major website like this?
Months would be nice.
Months would be nice. Ms. Campbell, is that accurate for your company as well?
That's correct.
And you were given 2 weeks, and yet months would have been nice. Is that what, I mean, if you were to do a contract for a system like this, what would you ask for in terms of doing the end-to-end test? Do you have standard industry recommendations?
So we weren't given 2 weeks. That was CMS who decided to conduct the tests in that 2 week time period. It wasn't ourselves doing the end-to-end.
Well, I think that's correct. But okay, as a vendor, and you want your company to come out of this looking good, not getting to spend your time with us as much as I'm sure you're enjoying it. But what should have the industry standard called for here? Have you ever undertaken bringing up a website, being a part of something this big, affecting this many people's lives?
I would say more
yes
testing.
Or no? Have you ever done one this big?
Of this complexity.
Correct.
I testified that this is by far, I think, the most complex in our country in a very long time.
And I think you're right. That's what I'm trying to get. Where should the end-to-end test have been done? If your company could have made that decision, what would you have made a recommendation for the complete integrated end-to-end testing to begin? When should that have started?
We would have loved to have had months to be able to do that.
Months, and that's the same. See, I was hearing that from people on the outside as this all was coming together. I chair the subcommittee on communications and technology. As I would reach out and just ask, how do you think this is going to work? This is exactly how outside people predicted it would turn out. And here we are today. This isn't a partisan issue about health care or not. People expect this thing to work. I mean, I went through this in Oregon with our DMV. Department of Motor Vehicles spent, I think it was $50 or $60 million back in the late 80s and finally scrapped the whole system because it was a failure. We said, stop. I don't want this to be a failure, but I want you all to get it fixed. But I'm very disturbed that CMS did not give you the adequate time that would be an industry standard to test this before every American said, okay, they tell me it's ready, I'm ready to go. Because you all came here and told us, and through us, the American people, it was good to go, and it wasn't.
Ms. DeGale.